Morning.
On.
Thank you so much for spending a Friday morning with me. I give you so much credit for just getting up. Half the challenge, for me anyway, on a Friday. To start, not to bore you again, but to just kind of touch on who I am, why I love food, how I found this love, where does it all come from. So, as JG mentioned, my name is Mackie, but I am actually starting off this presentation with a lie. That's not really my name. That's what I go by. My real name is Immaculata Teresa Rose Ermocida. But this is only a 20-minute talk. We can't spend the time to get into all that, right? But also, as JG touched on, there's always kind of been two parts to me. There's this a little bit less creative side, a little bit more formal education, traditional career path, but then this passion of mine, food. And I wanted to start off with where it came from, why I love it, like I said. So educationally, real quick, like you said, I went to Temple, and then I went to St. Joe's, and then I went back to Temple because apparently I love being a bird of prey as a mascot. I'm not quite sure, but I bounced back and forth between those two schools. And also, I am a Philly girl through and through, born and raised, and obviously stayed for my education. Go Birds, go Sixers, go Phils. Oh, go Union, too. Sorry, Flyers. So. But so to talk about that a little bit, that was just kind of this more traditional thing that I did. And as JG said, also not relevant to today. The food. Why I'm here, why I love it. So I was raised, like most people, with two sides of my family, my mother's family, my father's family. And in case my real name didn't give it away, I am Italian. Subtle. So these two sides of my family, on the surface, seem very similar. They're both Italian. Okay. But they're actually two very different growing up experiences. My mother's family is Italian-American. They've been here for about 4 to 5 to 6 generations, depending on which ancestor you point to. My father was actually born in Italy, very much an immigrant experience. He learned English as a second language. And these two growing up experiences, like I said, from the outside, they seem very similar. Oh, she's Italian, same thing. Very different. But the one thread that was constant was food. Italian culture is very much centered around food. That's not just a stereotype, it's very true. But what's interesting is that every celebration was always around the dinner table. Every loss was always grieved around the dinner table together. And as I got older, there was something so interesting I realized about food, and it's that it is this international unifier. You've never walked into a room and been like, how about that food? And people go, food, what is she talking about, right? We all need it. We know it. We love it. Even if you don't love it, you still appreciate when somebody's made you a home-cooked meal when you're having a bad time, right? Even if you yourself don't like to cook, you can appreciate the work and labor that goes into that. Now, the thing is, I also grew up as an incredibly picky eater. Much to my mother's chagrin, I was very rebellious at a very young age. Shout out to her patience. I ate maybe 5 to 6 things, and most of those things were pasta. But the thing was, I loved it, but I didn't know much about it. I knew what I knew, and that was kind of it, full stop. So as I got older, I get into college, and I decide I wanted to learn more about it because actually it started because I wanted to lose a little bit of weight. And I said, I don't think eating pasta and potatoes throughout life, oh, and corn, that was my big vegetable. I don't think this is going to do it for me. So what do? So I have to start learning about recipes, and I have to start learning about how to cook for myself. I have to start learning about what things are good for me and what things I like and how to cook them, and I don't know any of this. At this exact same time as 2006, when I start working in the food and beverage industry. So 2 things are happening at the same time for me. I'm learning about recipes on my own, for my own personal knowledge, edification, and I'm starting to work in a restaurant, and I'm seeing all these new cooking techniques that I never knew about. So what was supposed to be a summer job grew into a lifelong passion. And I've always stayed in touch with food and beverage in some way. Even if I didn't have the time to work in the industry, I was always an avid cooker. And I say cooker because I'm not a chef. I'm an at-home cook. But I was always deep into it. And I always kept in touch with it in some way because keeping in touch with it really kind of calmed me. It was really something centering for me. And so that kind of brings us into how Mackie's Meals arrives on the scene in 2020, in the height of COVID. I was at this weird juxtaposition because I had people in my life who were in these 9-to-5 jobs and people who were in food and beverage, right? And these two sides of me, of my life, they wanted to know each other, right? People were starting to do weird things with food and beverage in the industry because they're going, we need to do this takeout thing. We need to, redo our entire plan of how we were operating. And then I have these people in 9-to-5s going, we want to support small businesses. We don't know who to support. What are they doing? How can I get into these places? What do I do? And I said, oh, wait, I actually know both these answers. So I started this little social media platform to kind of introduce these two ideas together, right? Hey, this is what's going on. These are some really great food creators. And hey, people with 9-to-5s, this is where to go, and this is how to exchange this information, support each other, right? And it was really interesting, and I also focused a lot of my time on recipes originally, because a lot of people were forced to cook at home more than they ever wanted to in their entire lives. And I said, oh, wait, I have a bunch of those too. So that's where it started, and I kind of stayed in my little bubble for the longest time. In the past few months, though, starting at the end of last year, I started engaging with food differently as it's obviously safer to go out now. We're here together in this room. So all that together made me engage with food differently at the end of last year. And I would say Mackie's Meals is still in transition because what I started doing was engaging with food creators differently, doing more storytelling, and finding that really interesting and pivoting a little bit. Because I do try to focus on lesser known stories, as JG mentioned. I try to focus more on women and minority-owned food businesses because I think there's so much about that that's very interesting, and they oftentimes are the people that need bigger platforms. So I do my part there. Even though I have a small platform, I still want to use it. So I'm in transition with Mackie's Meals currently, but it's been a very interesting journey, and I'm excited to see what's next. Which brings us to today. Spicy. JG mentioned hot ones, one of my favorite odd watches, because I always feel bad for the people. So when I started with this topic, the thing is, you can't give a food nerd a topic like spicy and not expect him to go down a rabbit hole. Really problematic for me. I went down every rabbit hole you could go down. I searched the meaning of the word. I now know that there's somewhere in the ballpark of over 100 synonyms for the word spicy. I now know the history of the word spice, if anybody has the time or wants to know. But we all inherently know what the word spicy means, right? That if somebody eats something and we call spicy really means hot, right? You start sweating. But I did some more research outside of the traditional, let me look it up in a dictionary. And as I started to engage people about the word spicy, it got really interesting. The figurative meaning to people was really interesting. So I was just curious, what does spicy mean to you folks? That's not rhetorical. Controversial. Like a spicy take? Sassy. Provocative, yeah. This is very in line, I would say, with what the conversations I was having. Anything else come up for people when they think of spicy figuratively? Fun? Yeah. Not for everyone. Yeah, definitely. So in my conversations, I kind of made like a little tally of what words came up the most for people. And these were the 4 that came up the most. Different, unique, exotic, and exciting. And that was kind of cool. Because the response was, although not for everyone, overwhelmingly excited by the idea of spicy people, spicy personalities, spicy takes, right? And it's funny because I myself am someone who thinks of the world in relation to food. But really, so do a lot of people, right? Because to have a spicy person, a spicy take, you really are drawing a parallel to the literal spices of the world. So, what were my takeaways after all these conversations, right? So, if you see up top here, I said, white people can't handle spicy food, and it's obviously a joke, try again, sweetie, and it's a piece of white bread. And this is a little ode to, like I said, the history of spicy and the history of spices. Because, like I said, there's this stark parallel between the literal meaning and the figurative meaning. For the longest time, the world really operated, and by the world, what I mean is, spices are directly related to the equator line. Most spices or spicy food come from, frankly, lesser known areas, also generally poorer areas historically, countries you didn't read about in the traditional high school, college books, right? We know about the British empires, things like that. They were using a lot of salt for a long time. And what happens with time and globalization is that spices start to go to every corner of the world. Salt is out. We're changing the bland, we're changing the vanilla, and we're spicing them up. And nowadays, we all know it goes without saying, right? You would go, you get to a new kitchen, you would buy a spice rack is one of the first things you would buy. And that is very reflective of where we are kind of now with the figurative meaning, spicy personalities. Like I said, going back to what I said, there's an excitement around spicy people. There's an acceptance. People are intrigued by it. It's overwhelmingly positive. And it's different than it was years ago. And I say this because it makes me think of a story. My father, like I said, was born in Italy. He grew up eating very weird things for lunch. And he would get tormented by his classmates, made fun of. He was not bringing in peanut butter and jelly, guys. He was bringing in homemade tripe a lot. And for those of you who don't know what tripe is, it's the lining of a cow's stomach. And it sounds disgusting, I know, but it's a very common, like, Italian peasant food. And not that long ago, I went to a restaurant that's off and on, Best of Philly, and I looked at the menu, and for $40, I too could have a dish of tripe. And I thought, how interesting. How interesting to see where we've come. And like I said, the response was overwhelmingly negative, and the people were excited and accepting of spice. And I think that story is a direct analogy, right? There's a different opinion about unique people and unique opinions than there were years ago, much like this stripe that I can now pay $40 for. And when I also spoke to people about spicy in the figurative sense, what came up a ton was this idea of authenticity. People who were spicy were real, right? People who were spicy were sharing something about themselves in a real way. But again, people valued it. People are interested in it differently than, again, in the past. And I thought that was so beyond fascinating, that people wanted to talk to people that were spicy. So, let's all be really grateful that I don't know how to embed audio, because we would be listening to the Spice Girls, right? And what do I mean, though, when I say, after looking at everything, after looking at the words that came up for people, after looking at my notes for conversations, right? What did it all really mean? And when I say spice up your life, I think you know I don't actually mean buy a spice rack, right? What I mean is that I would encourage everyone to push yourself. Push yourself outside of your boundaries that you're used to. I mean, you're obviously here, so you understand the value of collaborating with people that are different than you. But you know, I go to things like this sometimes, and what do? I talk to the same people all the time, right? I do it, I'm guilty of it. But I also would say, push your boundaries in the internal, right? Try to be your most authentic self. Try to bring a vulnerability to what you're doing. Spacing of your life doesn't always have to come from the external. Push yourself, push those boundaries. And when you do collaborate with people, try to listen to stories that are different than yours. Ask about stories that are different than yours. It's really incredible. Like I said, Mackie's Meals is in this kind of weird transition. I'm building out my website a little bit to make more room for storytelling and make it less about just recipes and my favorite spots in the city. And in the past couple months, I've really taken an initiative to say, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to be conscious about doing it differently. And I've engaged with some of the most interesting people in this city. And what's happened when that occurs, when I've engaged with these people and I'm engaging with food differently, is that I'm being transformed. And in some ways, I'm bringing something to them that they didn't see before. And what's happening overall broadly is that we're then elevating the creative space we're in. And there's something so incredibly magical and powerful about that. To brainstorm with people that love what you love and are bringing so much different energies, so much different opinions to a space like that. It's an unbelievable power. And then if you think about that layered on top of everything that I had read and looked at and all that stuff, it makes you wonder how interesting of a time we're in. The world is thirsting for unique and authentic stories. And that's so powerful if you could bring the spice of your life to those kind of spaces, to use them for good, to use them to improve the spaces that you're in. So my final thought here today is to challenge yourself. Break out of that mold. Do something different. Engage with different people. Engage with yourself differently. And seize this unbelievable moment in time. Because you really don't know what tomorrow will bring. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend.